we talk about one of the biggest issues that South Asia is facing: climate change. The region, where almost all nations fall in developing categories, has faced some of the worst effects of climate change in the last few years. This, even after their contribution to the phenomenon has been near negligible. With COP27 Egypt in focus, we talk about the existential need for climate action in South Asia.
Floods, heat waves, rains, cyclones. 2022 has been a tremendously hard year for South Asia. The region standing at the forefront of climate crisis has witnessed extremes never seen before. This bout with hostile climate conditions is not new for the region. Every year, people have seen the situation worsen, with a fear instilled of what the future might hold. The World Bank says in the last 2 decades, more than half of all South Asians have been impacted by one or more climate-related disasters. That is nearly 800 million people, living in areas far off from the developed West. Millions of people who played next to no role in bringing in the crisis that threatens their existence. The scale of these disasters is not just testing the limits of the people, but also governments. Administrations across the world are trying hard to adjust to the new normal, as conditions continue to take a rising financial toll. World Bank numbers say that South Asian nations will incur costs of over $160 billion a year because of global warming.
If developing countries are to continue to invest in the climate action that they need to take in the long term and the short term, they need to see those funds flow from the developed countries who have greater historical responsibility for the causes of climate change. So it has to happen. The money has to flow, the resources, the support, the technology, the capacity building have to be there. And it's really important for us all to remember that no one country can find its way out of this crisis alone. It is a collaborative effort. We have to work in solidarity with all countries. And that means the wealthier have to support those with fewer means to make the changes.
In recent years, vulnerable countries, including those in Asia, have called for additional funds for loss and damage. The nations at risk are suffering huge losses from natural disasters, intensified by human activities. These costs are beyond mitigation or adaptation, what the developed West talks about, but for helping millions get back on their feet after facing nature's fury, loss and damage is still not part of the standing COP agendas, but sits on the sidelines as a provisional one.
Loss and damage needs to be part of the core agenda of COP27 to meet the pressing humanitarian needs of those that are trapped in a crisis of public financing fueled by debt and yet have to fund climate disasters on their own. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now or never. For us, there is indeed no planet B.
While vulnerable nations fight for their demands for compensation, emissions are on the rise worldwide. Western nations are burning fossil fuels to minimize the energy fallout from the Ukraine war, despite their previous promises of going green.
The ground reality is that the fossil fuel-based industrialized countries of G7 and G20, who have been the main promoters of green hydrogen, are now backtracking to use fossil fuel. Such double standards are unacceptable. Developed nations should be giving leadership to overcome climate challenges rather than abdicating their responsibilities.
These countries are doing their bit, coming up with climate-resilient projects, helping people mitigate the impact, pooling funds for the affected, but that is not enough. Much of the damage caused is irreversible. It will take commitment and checks to minimize the impact on the population, to help the millions who are at risk of losing everything, who are at risk of becoming climate refugees if nations and industries continue to ignore the harsh reality and not act when there is still time. South Asia Bureau, WION World is One.